Well, hello everyone. This is Dylan Fabrizio. I'm coming at you at a time, it is Wednesday, March 25th, where many people across the country are living in quarantine. And wanted to just bring an encouraging word from the book of James. So this lesson will focus on James chapter 1. And there's a lot of crazy things going on right now, but there's so much to be joyful about and thankful for. And that's what the goal of this message is. So I'd like to begin by showing you a video that hopefully you can enjoy and laugh at.
Itchy tummy piglet, wee 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 wee. Scratchy scratchy piglet, wee 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 wee. Squishy squishy piglet, wee 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 wee. Itchy tummy piglet, wee 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 wee. Merrily goes, standing on his toes, scratching to and fro on his mama's nose. Scratchy scratchy piglet, wee 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 wee. Itchy tummy piglet, wee 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 wee.
All right, hopefully you can laugh at that and enjoy that. Back to James. I'd like to begin by saying James was written by the brother of Jesus, that James we're referring to here. And in Mark 6, there's a quick story where it says Jesus left his hometown and he was accompanied by his disciples. And on a Sabbath, he began to teach in a synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. They said, "Where did this man get these things? What is this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he's been performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own home." He could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. So here's a reference to the real person of James who wrote this book that's giving us our encouragement today. Next up, I'd like to show a quick, brief intro on the book of James. This was also done by the Bible Project, great resource to check out. I encourage you to look them up at BibleProject.com or the Bible Project YouTube page. A lot of excellent information there. So let's check it out.
The letter of James, or at least that's his name in English. If you look in the Greek, you will see that his name is Jacobos, which translates his Hebrew name Yaakov. And that's why most ancient and modern translations render his name as Jacob. That's what we're going to call him in this video. Now, there are many Jacobs in the New Testament. Two of them belong to Jesus' inner circle of the 12 disciples, but this letter comes from the Jacob who was the half-brother of Jesus himself. Now, we learn this Jacob story from the book of Acts and from Paul's letters. After Peter moved on from Jerusalem to go start new churches, Jesus' half-brother Jacob rose to prominence as a leader in the mother church in Jerusalem. It was made up mostly of Messianic or Christian Jews. This was the first Christian community ever, and we know that it fell on hard times during the 20 years that Jacob was its leader. There was a famine that led to great poverty in the region, and these Messianic Jews were being persecuted by Jewish leaders in Jerusalem. But through it all, Jacob was known as a pillar of the Jerusalem church. He was also known as a peacemaker who led with wisdom and courage until he was tragically murdered. And in this book, we have the legacy of Jacob's teaching and wisdom condensed into a short and very powerful work. The book begins like a letter. He greets all the Messianic Jews who were living outside the land of Israel. But this does not read like one of Paul's letters where he addresses specific problems in one local church. Rather, this book is a summary of Jacob's sage wisdom for any and every community of Jesus' followers. And Jacob's goal isn't to teach new theological information. Rather, he wants to get in your business and challenge how you live. Jacob's wisdom has been heavily influenced by two sources. The first is Jesus' teaching about life in the kingdom of God, especially the Sermon on the Mount, which he's constantly echoing and quoting in the book. The second key influence is the biblical wisdom book of Proverbs, especially the poems in Proverbs 1 through 9. Jacob literally grew up with Jesus and with the book of Proverbs, and so now his own teaching sounds like them. It's stamped by their language and imagery. The book consists of short, challenging wisdom speeches that are full of metaphors and easy to memorize one-liners. And in essence, Jacob is calling the Messianic community to become truly wise by living according to Jesus' summary of the Torah, to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. The body of the book is in chapters 2.
All right, well, one thing I took away from that video is that a good companion to reading the book of James is absolutely the book of Proverbs and the Gospels, including the Sermon on the Mount. So that's a good reference to think about. When James is quoting the Old Testament here, he's using the Greek version or the Septuagint, and that's a great resource for us to look up as well. But I'd like to get in and start reading it now. So I'm reading from the NIV. If you'd like to follow along with another version, that's totally great. But I'm just going to read it out loud. James 1, 1 through 12. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. Greetings. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. The brother in humble circumstances ought to take pride in his high position, but the one who is rich should take pride in his low position, because he will pass away like a wildflower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls, and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich man will fade away, even while he goes about his business. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. So I want to begin with the first phrase there where it says scattered. So I want to show you a map of the New Testament world. We think this is actually like more of an Old Testament map, the Assyrian Empire. But this is an example of what the New Testament world looks like. And James tells the believers, he says to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. Kind of like if you go to Waffle House and you order your hash browns scattered, covered, and smothered. It means they put everything on it. But in this case, scattered is all the Christians who are dispersed throughout the known world. And in Acts 8 it says this, that Saul approved of his execution, talking about Stephen here. And there arose on that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And so James is writing here to those who are scattered, so the Christians around the world. It's a general letter addressing all Christians. But he reminds them to consider it a joy, all the difficulties, all the persecutions that they're facing, and to persevere under the trial. Persevere under this testing, under these difficult times. And remember God's promises that he's given to us. So question right now, some reflection. Maybe you're with someone else, or you're just thinking by yourself while you watch this. What are some trials that you have faced? Maybe not just now, but major trials in your life that you have faced. Think about that for a minute. And how did you overcome it? I think that's something that we can all relate to. We all have had many difficult seasons in our life, and we have to ask ourselves, well, how did we get out of this? And I think for many of us who are Christians, the answer is it was only God's strength who led me out of this. And in a time like now, that's what we have to rely on, is God's strength, even in the uncertainty that we're facing now. But let's keep reading in James 1, 13 through 18. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desire he is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brother. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. So in this section, it talks about being tempted and where sin comes from. It gives the analogy of giving birth, which is a very graphic description. And it's very clear that when we are tempted, God is not the one who is tempting us. Perhaps we could say Satan is tempting us, but in James it says that our own evil desire is what is enticing us and dragging us away into sin. And when it's full grown and it's a thought that is full grown, it's conceived. When it gives birth to death. Very interesting analogy. So, obviously, if God does not tempt people, then where does temptation come from? Kind of gave you the answer there, but it's something to think about. Oftentimes we think, well, Satan is our tempter, and very, very likely that Satan does tempt us. In fact, in the Gospels, Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness. But also, sometimes we give in to our own evil desires within ourselves. No one is good except God alone, right? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Let's keep reading James 1:19 through 27. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like a man who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But the man who looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues to do this, not forgetting what he has heard, but doing it, he will be blessed in what he does. If anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself, and his religion is worthless. Religion that our God, our Father, accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So, I love the challenge here. It asks us to get rid of moral filth in our lives. That would be in verse 21. And so ask yourself, how can we get rid of moral filth in our lives? What does that look like for you personally on a daily basis? It could be avoiding certain things. It could be throwing your TV in the trash. It could be getting rid of your smartphone. It could be not going to the same places they usually go. Ask yourself, how do you get rid of moral filth in your life? And then, of course, the challenge and encouragement is don't just listen to the word. It's of great value to memorize Scripture, but it's of even greater value to live it out. Memorize it and then live it out. Faith with action, of course. And I think that should give us encouragement. But I want to look at the end there. It talks about religion. If anyone considers himself religious and does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself. Of course, the challenge for us is to be slow to speak and quick to listen. I have to confess something that I have struggled with many times in my life, to be slow to speak and quick to listen. It's always going to be a challenge. But do you know someone who considers himself spiritual but not religious? Perhaps this person here. Someone in a Orthodox church or a Catholic church, that you see this, and to them and to you, you think, oh, they look really spiritual, waving this incense. Maybe to them, they're like, no, we do this for a certain reason. But to us, we might think, oh, that's really religious of them. But they think, I'm really spiritual. I want to show you a quick video of the world's largest censer. Some of you may have seen this before, but here it is. Okay, I wanted to stop it there before someone's head gets taken off by that massive sensor. I have to say, if that was your church on a Sunday morning, it would be a lot of fun. Um, Depending on how it's viewed, some people might view it as being a really religious thing to do every week, and others might think that is really spiritual. But I want to show you this picture here of these two people meditating / levitating over mountains or the ocean or whatever this is. Maybe you know someone who is like of the Eastern-minded meditation group or New Age mysticism, and they consider themselves quite spiritual. They say, I don't practice a religion, but I'm spiritual. I meditate, and maybe they're like the people who just levitate in midair. I'm just kidding. Or maybe someone like this who they go out in nature and they're just at one with nature. They sniff pine leaves like this guy. Just kidding. That's me being goofy on the Appalachian Trail. It smelled really good in that forest, and then Claire took a ridiculous picture of me. But ask yourself this. Agree or disagree with this statement, and maybe you bring someone else in the room, or you guys talk about this later throughout your day. I'd rather be spiritual than religious. And I think, there's different ways to answer this. Agree or disagree. I think you could probably agree or disagree if you think about it. But one thing that's clear in James chapter 1 is that religion that God thinks is pure and faultless is to look after orphans and widows. So is religion bad? Well, of course not. Is being overly religious and being a zealot like the Pharisees a good thing? Well, probably not. And is being spiritual a bad thing? Definitely not. But if it's only emotions involved, then we might be coming into an area that could be problematic. And then I want to close with this, a challenge. Write down some personal trials that you are facing, along with something you are joyful about, and then read James chapter 2. Thanks for joining me, and hope you can find some encouragement from this word. I'm going to close with a video, and then we'll be done.
What if I told you Jesus came to abolish religion? What if I told you voting Republican really wasn't his mission? What if I told you Republican doesn't automatically mean Christian, and just because you call some people blind doesn't automatically give you vision? I mean, if religion is so great, why has it started so many wars? Why does it build huge churches but fails to feed the poor? Tell single moms God doesn't love them if they've ever had a divorce, but in the Old Testament, God actually calls religious people whores. Religion might preach grace, but another thing they practice. Tend to ridicule God's people. They did it to John the Baptist. They can't fix their problems, and so they just mask it, not realizing religion's like spraying perfume on a casket. See, the problem with religion is it never gets to the core. It's just behavior modification, like a long list of chores. Like, let's dress up the outside, make it look nice and neat. But it's funny, that's what they used to do to mummies while the corpse rots underneath. Now, I ain't judging. I'm just saying, quit putting on a fake look. Because there's a problem if people only know that you're a Christian by your Facebook. I mean, in every other aspect of life, you know that logic's unworthy. It's like saying you play for the Lakers just because you bought a jersey. See, this was me too, but no one seemed to be on to me. Acting like a church kid while addicted to pornography. See, on Sunday I'd go to church, but Saturday getting faded, acting if I was simply created to just have sex and get wasted. See, I spent my whole life building this facade of neatness, but now that I know Jesus, I boast in my weakness. Because if grace is water, then the church should be an ocean. It's not a museum for good people, it's a hospital for the broken. Which means I don't have to hide my failure, I don't have to hide my sin. Because it doesn't depend on me, it depends on Him. See, because when I was God's enemy, and certainly not a fan, He looked down and said, I want that man. Which is why Jesus hated religion, and for it He called them fools. Don't you see so much better than just following some rules? Now let me clarify. I love the church, I love the Bible, and yes, I believe in sin. But if Jesus came to your church, would they actually let Him in? See, remember He was called a glutton and a drunkard by religious men. But the Son of God never supports self-righteousness, not now, not then. Now back to the point, one thing is vital to mention. how Jesus and religion are on opposite spectrums. See, one's the work of God, but one's a man-made invention. See, one is the cure, but the other's the infection. See, because religion says do, Jesus says done. Religion says slave, Jesus says son. Religion puts you in bondage, while Jesus sets you free. Religion makes you blind, but Jesus makes you see. And that's why religion and Jesus are two different clans. Religion is man searching for God. Christianity is God searching for man, which is why salvation is freely mine and forgiveness is my own, not based on my merits, but Jesus' obedience alone. Because he took the crown of thorns and the blood dripped down his face. He took what we all deserved. I guess that's why you call it grace. And while being murdered, he yelled, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." Because when he was dangling on that cross, he was thinking of you. And he absorbed all your sin and he buried it in the tomb, which is why I'm kneeling at the cross saying, come on, there's room. So for religion, no, I hate it. In fact, I literally resent it. Because when Jesus said, "It is finished," I believe he meant it.